Did you know that having the right attitude actually impacts our ability to create and build wealth? Today, Billy's going to be continuing talking about the 7 attitudes to help you and I build kingdom wealth. Stay tuned.
What most of us have heard in the church has been that we should prosper, but nobody's telling us how to prosper. It is God that blesses the work of your hands. It is God that gives the new wine, but it is us that are responsible for giving to God a new wineskin.
Welcome to Kingdom Wealth with Billy Epperhart. Billy, this has been an amazing series talking about these 7 attitudes. Who would have thought that we have to have the right attitude to build wealth?
Oh man, I'm telling you, and your attitude literally acts as a magnet that draws or attracts, or it can be the polar opposite, like, you have the polar opposite on that and it repels.
Oh.
So your attitude can actually repel the good things, the favor of God coming to your life, or your attitude can attract it. And what we've been talking about in these steps you take is to create that attraction that brings the favor of God to your life.
It's so good. And so many of the things that Billy has been sharing, I have definitely listened to Billy a lot, but I'm hearing new things. And Billy, they're really impacting all of our lives, and I really appreciate it. So let me just give you a quick review of the 7 attitudes. And the first one that we started with is accept personal responsibility. Second one is take personal control. Third one is expect the best. Fourth is be willing to get creative. Fifth one is have the confidence to design your future. Sixth one is learn to take action. And today, the 7th one is be adaptable. And it's like, oh no, do you mean that we might have to get used to doing something different?
Well, and that's so true, Karen, because what happens is one of the reasons that we have the adaptable at number 7 is that you're taking action, you're beginning to move forward, but things aren't always going to work like you thought they would or in the way you thought they would. And so therefore you have to be adaptable to make adjustments along the way. And I say this about real estate investing all the time, that what real estate investing really is about, it's about problem solving. So if you're a good problem solver, then you'll end up being a good investor, right?
Yes.
You've got to learn to be a problem solver.
Really good, Billy.
And here's the key. You should be able to solve problems either other people are not willing to, or in some instances they're unable to. So so that's the key. The key is being, I tell the story about having a duplex, and I remember, you just jump in, you don't know, right? You don't know. And so
you just take action.
You just take action. I had this one property, and I remember it was a great property. I mean, I bought it for a little bit of money, and relatively to the value of it. Truthfully, I did. I mean, that was a phenomenal property, and it was a duplex. So I mean, the cash flow in that property, based on our numbers, we always teach people if you can bring in 1%, right, gross rent on the value of the house, we call it your monthly gross rent, should be at least 1% of what you paid for the house. This property got to 3%.
Whoa.
3%. And I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing. So I remember, this is crazy. I remember I had that property probably 6 or 7 months. And I mean, it's just printing money, right? I mean, It's phenomenal. And then I get a water bill. I'll never forget it to this day. The water bill was $630.
Oh my goodness.
On the whole property. And so I called the property manager and said, hey, I got this water bill for $630 on this property. And so can you go see what's happening? So he goes over there, and in one of the units of the duplex, the little $1.28 piece was getting stuck in the toilet and letting the toilet run all month.
Oh my goodness.
Now we're going back quite a few years. So I remember having to go to the hardware store, or they did, and I asked them how much they spent. It was like $1.28 for that particular piece. Oh. So I said to the property manager, what can I do to eliminate this? He said, why don't we just separately meter the property, because I was actually paying the utilities.
Oh, wow.
So what we did was we separately metered. The electricity was separately metered, but the water wasn't. So I said, how much is it to get it separately metered? I remember to this day, $1,500. I paid $1,500, and I actually went up on the 3%, right? The growth. And the issue was, it was as simple as $1,500 to solve the problem. And it honestly solved it permanently, because if the water was running, it's their bill, not mine.
Oh, that's so
You understand?
good.
So all of a sudden they get motivated
Yes.
to want to let us know the toilet's not working.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
so the point of that is that I'm talking about problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to learn to adapt to succeed, because you're going to be faced with challenges, you're going to be faced with obstacles, you're going to be chased with things, you're going to face things sometimes you don't even know what to do. But it's amazing how the creativity of the Holy Spirit will come out of you, and you'll learn in that creativity how to adapt and adjust to be able to fix and what needs to be fixed, and to solve problems that need to be solved.
That's really good. And so it's even just being open to something that's different than what we're used to.
That's right.
Being willing to change. And I like how you put that right back to, okay, I'm facing a problem, and my source is, I'm going to talk to the Holy Spirit about this. And he helps us to solve problems. And you're right. We see this all the time. You've seen this too in real estate. You go into a property and you can tell that they started doing the renovations, and then they ran into a problem.
Boom.
And they stopped.
That's exactly
Which
what
can
happened.
become our opportunity. But in that, Billy, how do we learn to be adaptable? How do we create the softness in us to be willing to change like this?
You know, the truth is this is going to sound antithetical, but I'm going to say it. One of the things that keeps us from personally adapting and changing, adapt to succeed, is we take offense at things that happened that we didn't see coming. And I don't mean just, stay with me here, I don't mean just offense at other people who did something to us. Sometimes we take offense at God. You know, we feel like sometimes we'll take offense at ourselves, and I call that disappointment. It becomes disappointment. Which is what Elijah went through in 1 Kings chapter 19, you know, and he lay under the juniper tree in verse 4 and asked the Lord to take his life. He went literally from the mountaintop. And the truth is, let me just say this is really good, I think. Elijah went through that disappointment. He had faced down the prophets of Baal on the mountaintop. I tell this story. Now here he is a chapter later. He's laying on the juniper tree wanting to die because Jezebel's after him.
That's right.
What was really going on there, if you read that passage, is God was wanting Elijah to adapt, because what he said to him, he actually said to him twice in verse 9 of 1 Kings 19, and I believe it's verse 13 or 14, he said to him twice, he asked him the question, what are you doing here, Elijah? He asked him that question twice.
Wow.
And he was trying to locate him and get him to locate himself, and here's what happened. When he finally heard the voice of the Lord, you know, God wasn't in the fire, he wasn't in the wind, wasn't in the earthquake, and Elijah finally heard the voice. The voice was, now here's, Elijah, what I want you to go do. And God was actually showing him to anoint Jehu, to anoint, I think it's Hazael over Syria, Jehu over Israel, and Elisha in Elijah's place. So he gave him this whole next picture of what happens when we learn to adapt. We learn to make adjustments, then other things open up to us in a way, in a dimension that we never even knew existed.
So good.
Right? But it's because of the change that happens on the inside of us. So those are the kind of adjustments that you have to make. And I think of Jacob, when Jacob went through what he went through with Laban, his father-in-law.
Yes.
And he actually said to his father-in-law, I'm going to paraphrase here, but you've changed, he said to Laban, you've changed my wages 50 times, basically. You've changed them so many times I can't even count, because Laban was shrewd, he was a wheeler dealer, and Jacob honestly was a wheeler dealer himself. So there in the very end, when he said, I want to take my two wives with me, Rachel and Leah. I want to take them with me and go back home. Laban said, no, please don't go. He said, name me your wages. And instead of Jacob giving him a number, he said, I'll keep the spotted and speckled cattle that come out And so they went and removed all the spotted and speckled. Laban took those along with the solid colors, and then as they began to, and he separated them out of the flock. So the only thing that was left was solid color. That was it. And so Jacob took those and managed them, and he put those strips of poplar, right? He put those rods up in the troughs, and every time those solid colored animals came, Jacob saw through those to the striped poles, and he saw in his heart, in his mind, he saw spotted and speckled cattle and goats, etc., livestock. He saw that in his spirit. He adapted. In other words, he made such a major change in how he adapted and saw and thought. You know, I've even thought in reading that in Genesis chapter 30, why he didn't think about that before.
Yeah.
Right? But it was just the right time, the time of the Lord for him in his life, but he was willing to adapt to succeed. So he adapted, and he became, the Bible's very plain. I think it's in Genesis 30, and if you read, I think it's the very last or right at the end of that particular chapter in Genesis chapter 30, if you read right there on the end, it actually says, "Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks, female, male servants, camels, and donkeys." So it says, and it came to pass whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that's what he was working on. It was that act of adapting in his really resistant circumstances that allowed him to go with great wealth back to his home where he was from, which is where he ended up settling. That's where and most people, just to help remind us all of biblical history, that's where the 12 tribes came from, was out of Jacob. Jacob was the father of the 12 tribes. So it's amazing when you see how he adapted in very stringent circumstances to succeed beyond your wildest dreams. That's a perfect example of someone facing all odds.
Yes.
Against all odds, he rose up and God blessed him and he became exceedingly prosperous, the Bible says.
That is so good. And in that, I can't imagine how discouraged he was. Probably like, this is so unfair. And, had to at least be tempted to run. Like, okay, I'm done with this.
He was several times. You got to remember, he worked 20 years for Laban. So the first time, Laban changed his wages was when he said, "I'll work 7 years for Rachel." Mm-hmm. And he ended up giving him Leah. Now, the good news is he gave Rachel to him a week later, but he had to agree to work another 7 years to do it. And at the time he did the rods, he was in his third phase of 7 years. He had 1 7 years, 2 7 years. He was starting on his third 7 years, and it got into 6 years. So he'd been there for 20 years when he did the poplar rods.
Wow.
And so this whole time he was learning to adapt to succeed. And as he did that, it was amazing what God did for him.
Yeah. And if he would have stopped, he would have missed it.
That's correct.
And I think a lot of times, people, we all face that. It's like, how much am I supposed to take here, right?
That's exactly right.
But you stay with it.
You stay with it. You don't quit. You don't give up, and then people say you're an overnight success. They have no idea that, you spent 20 years in this phase, 20 years in this phase, right? Those are the things you learn, and one of the things you learn to do is be a problem solver. You learn to adapt to succeed. And very candidly, I don't want to get too far off here, but one of the things we see in today's politicians, many of them that don't have the business background, they just get locked into a certain way of thinking, a certain way of doing things, and you take a real business person and put them in there that has had to make adjustments to succeed. They ask, why can't we do that now here, right?
Yes.
And they bring that creativity, right, to the table, and many times it's amazing what gets accomplished that some people think will take forever to do it, and they get it done in 6 months.
Wow, so good.
So it's just, that's where we are, and here we had written down railroad companies. Railroad companies at the turn of the century thought they were in the railroad business. Mm-hmm. They weren't in the railroad business, they were in the transportation business. But they got so locked into being in the railroad business, they missed it. Now, today we still have railroads because of the large freight that needs to be carried. But basically, passenger for railroads and things, especially in America, because of our highway system and airplanes flying and many other things we're able to do to get the transportation. You can't take a railroad overseas. That would be. So the truth is that we have to realize that we have to adapt to succeed. And we could go into the cell phone industry, replacing the Bell telephone companies where the wired was. I mean, we could go into the internet, replace Blockbusters. Britannica's encyclopedia was done away with because of the internet. Even though I know they still have. You can get it online, right? But the point is all the things we depended on, many things we depended on the last 50 years are no longer even there. In fact, it's kind of funny when I look back, because of our age, and I look back at the things that we had to have, right, when we were younger, and nowadays they don't even exist.
So it's amazing. I was reading, or actually watching, a little bit of a program on Elon Musk. And one of his first, you probably know this better than me, but one of his first sales of a company, he got over 400 some million, this was years ago, was because he had this idea that you could read the news on the internet. And the other newspapers are like, no, you can't do that. And so he was thinking about being adaptable, seeing in the future. And with the Holy Spirit in us, how much more do we have?
Do that?
Yes.
It just shows you how locked in we get in our thinking.
We do.
Right, and we end up limiting the Holy One of Israel. We talked about that in our earlier program.
We did.
You end up limiting God in our life, not allowing Him, because we think, oh, that's crazy, that's impossible. But it's really the Lord showing us how to adapt to succeed.
That's so good. One of the questions that you ask us, Billy, as we're kind of journeying through this, to maybe know if we're at that point where maybe we need to look at being adaptable or make a shift or whatever that looks like, is do you enjoy the results of your life right now? And so in that, how does that help lead us into understanding that maybe we're at that point that we need to make an adjustment?
Because most people would answer that question, no, I'm not enjoying the results of my life right now, right?
Yes.
They would say no, or I have bigger dreams, or no, I'm disappointed, right? Or whatever the answer may be. And so, what I would say is you're not a tree planted in one spot. You can change, right?
Yes.
And let me say this, I haven't used this quote in a long time, but here it is. The secret to your better future is you.
That is so good. Say that again.
Yeah, the secret to your better future is you. In other words, it's you changing, it's you adapting, it's you making the adjustments that you need to make in your life. And so if you're stuck in a certain spot, or you feel stuck, you seem stuck, whatever, maybe you're not happy with where you're at, or even if you're partially happy, maybe here or there with something. The truth is that you're not a tree, you can change, right? You can move, you can do different things. And so you have to adapt to succeed, which is what we're talking about, this seventh attitude. And so you have to realize that if you're in a certain place right now in your life, whatever it is, it's primarily, it may not be only because, but it's primarily because of the choices you made. And so it's primarily affected by the choices you made. So you have to look back on that. And I'm not talking about getting guilty and under guilt and beating yourself up. I'm just saying recognize that you can choose to adapt and succeed by changing the formula you've been living by, the way you've been thinking. You can change that. Now, sometimes you have to really be intentional about it to do it, but you can do it, and God will meet you there at the point of that change.
That's really good. If we take a real practical approach to this, let's just say real estate. We teach people about multiple exit strategies, or even if we see the commercial market is faltering a bit, like re-looking at that commercial property.
Right.
So in all these different ways, when we go into real estate, we might have the highest and best, but there's indicators that tell us, like, you know what, you may need to shift and do something different.
Absolutely.
So can you give us, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here,
no
just
problem.
some examples of you and Miss Becky as you've walked through this, whether it's in real estate, ministry, business, or whatever, where you really hit that place and said, you know what, I need to be adaptable here, and how you identified it and walked that out?
I think to answer that, I look back on some of the challenges that I faced, right? And honestly, I said this to you, I think, off camera, but the reason I wrote the book Change Mastery is because I was having a hard time with change, right? Sometimes it's your own altar you have to live out of, right? True. And I remember some different changes. I remember when I left the first church I was and moved several thousand miles from the South to Colorado. And I remember there was an excitement about it, but boy, I was giving up security at a high level. I mean, I had tremendous security. And I remember in that instance, it was the letting go of security that was so difficult. Truthfully, I had accomplished, I'm saying this with as much integrity as I can, I had reached every financial goal I had, meaning at that moment, that point in my life, I had reached that. I had reached every ministry goal at that time. Now, there was much more God wanted me to do, but at that time, I had reached it. And what I didn't realize was what God really wanted me to do was set new goals, and that was one of the reasons. Set new things, set your sights at a different place. Every time in life you get to one horizon. When you're down here, you're seeing things kind of at this horizon, but when you get to this next horizon, all of a sudden you see things you didn't see before. From when you were down here, right? Yes. So each horizon brings a new sight, but it also brings new insight. And so you move from sight to insight in your life to understand. And so that was one example. And I think about the transitions. And our second larger transition, once we had built the place of wealth, I remember Miss Becky had a hard time making the big second transition. She'll talk about that on our programs. She had a difficult time. And so if you look at the transitions you go through, I think those are the bigger times, right? And even coming here to what we're doing here at Andrew Wommack Ministries and 𝗪𝗪 Bible College, there was a transition there, right? And the good news is I got to kind of filter into it, right? It wasn't like one big deal, but you filter. So I think the changes you deal with, and a lot of times, let me just say this is going to sound strong, okay? It's going to be strong, but sometimes it's things like disappointment and frustration that trigger us to what's next. And I don't mean that we're running from something, right? But it causes us to run to God, causes us to run to literally God's purpose in our life. And one reason that we get comfortable and familiar with where we're at, things are going good, and it takes God stirring our nest to get us to go, okay, it's time to do what's next.
Oh, that is so good. I was just thinking about a time that in your life where you had reached all those goals, and it's kind of funny. I mean, Becky kind of threatened you, which you can share that story. But you were super comfortable with everything, and if you looked at your life, you could have been completely satisfied.
Yeah.
But in that, God had more. So can you just kind of share what that process looked like, and how did you actually decide, okay, I'm going to be adaptable again after I've achieved everything that I was desiring?
That story is almost weird because my whole goal in life at that time when I turned 50 was to retire.
Yeah.
Right? Actually in my late 40s, and just to retire, right? And so what happened was I went through that period of my life for about 2 years. And that's when Miss Becky came in and told me if I didn't get off the couch, she was going to kill me. And she's a South Texas girl. She knows how to shoot, right? So, but she was really trying to stir my nest herself. But then I was also getting dissatisfied. And I'll tell you what happened was I walked into the restroom. I had a beautiful home in Houston and that time, and I had some stuff up in Colorado in the mountains, all this during that period of time. And I remember I walked in one day in the property in Houston, and I looked in the bathroom mirror, and I looked in it on my side of the bathroom in my mirror. I looked at it, and I just looked old, and I was really in my early 50s, and 51, 52, and I just looked old. And I remember the thought came to me, if you continue on like you are right now, you're going to die. That really did come in my mind. And I believe it wasn't the devil. I believe it was the Holy Spirit prompting me that it's time to get up. And, honestly, I didn't want to do what I'm doing right now. I didn't want to sit on a set and talk about this stuff. I didn't, TV set. I didn't want to, come lead a major ministry. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I really didn't. I mean, you could have offered me just about anything during that period of time, and I'd said no. But God used that to stir my pot. He'll stir your nest, right? Like the eaglets, right? He'll stir you. And I tell the story about the eagles that they'll they'll take their young that are in the nest and they will force them intentionally out of the nest. And they can't fly, meaning they haven't flown yet.
Right.
And so they'll be fluttering, and the mama eagle will fly under, or sometimes the father will fly under them and let them land on their back.
Wow.
Literally. Other times they'll grab them by their talons, but sometimes they'll fly under them and pick them up. And that's what the Lord's wanting to do for us, is that sometimes we have to get out of the nest. And it seems like we're in a free fall, and then God reaches under us and picks us up so that we can get where He wants us to get.
Oh, so good. I think some people watching are understanding that's what's going on with me.
Yeah,
right?
they feel like they're falling.
Yeah, I felt like I was falling.
Yeah.
Wow, Billy, that is so good. And also one of the final thoughts that we have here is, if you're not moving forward, you are going backwards.
Yeah, I think there's no static place to be. And I think that's where a lot of times people, and truly the majority of people, I don't mean this in any condescending or condemning way, but a lot of people, including where I was at the time I'm telling the story, we get in those places of complacency, right? And, you know, the Lord said in Jeremiah chapter 48, talking about, again, Moab, and He said He has that, and I think it's in Jeremiah 48 verses 11 and 12, He said He has settled on His dregs, right? Which is a wine analogy, where wine will sit in a bottle or in a big vat. It'll sit on the dregs, and then a certain taste permeates the wine. And what He said was, He says that in about Moab, said your taste has remained in him. He said this, his scent has not changed, and his taste has remained in him. Therefore, I'm going to send wine workers that will break his bottles. Break his bottles. It's going to empty out. The bottle's going to be ruined and the wine's going to be ruined because his scent has not changed. And that's what happens to us. We get in a place and our scent has not changed. And I think one of the things that you look at people that truly live a long time, they're people that adapt, they succeed, they stay busy at some level. There's things that are going on in their life, and those that really live are those that do not ever let go of their purpose until they literally physically depart from this world, so to speak. And so this earth suit passes away and they go into the eternal dimension, of course, with Jesus, with God. And so that's the thing. I think that's one of the goals I had coming out. I use the term goal. One of the desires I have coming out is that I want to be like Paul said, I have run my course, I've finished my race, right? I want to finish my race. I want to finish my race well.
That is so good. Wow, this has been really, really powerful. And I just want to remind all of you that we actually have a free download available. It's a booklet that Billy wrote, and it's called The Leader Manager, How to Guide Your Organization to Success. And this will challenge you in your thinking, teach you to be a little adaptable with things as you grow in your business or real estate business. So to take advantage of this amazing offer, go to kingdomwealthgtn.com. Also, we're only able to brush at a high level in these programs. If you want to go in deep, you'll want to go to kingdomwealthgtn.com and purchase Billy's Triple X Factor training. It's an amazing training. Billy, this has been so good. And we just want to thank all of you for being a part of Kingdom Wealth. Join us next time on Kingdom Wealth with Billy Epperhart.